This week, it's episode 2 of our State of the Sitcom miniseries.
We'll be covering the classic sitcom, The Cosby Show.
We'll be continuing each week with State of the Sitcom. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Podbean, on all the podcast sites. So stay tuned because we'll be continuing with special guests every episode and covering the whole spectrum of sitcoms from I Love Lucy all the way up to Rick and Morty.
And if you enjoy what you hear, please leave us a review because that's always nice to see.
So, on to the episode.
Before we start the episode, we'd just like to explain for context that we recorded this episode earlier in 2018 before the verdict in the Cosby case was released, in which Bill Cosby was found guilty. So that you may hear the words accusations and things like that. We, of course, have complete faith in the fact that he was found guilty and that is a fact now. Also, we'd like to point out that there may be some triggering content in this episode because we are going to obviously cover that aspect of what's happened and other
comedians and sitcoms that have had similar situations with everything that's come out since the Weinstein case. So anything we do say, there could be triggering effects.
That said, we found this to be a really interesting discussion with Kobi, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Judgecast.
Hello and welcome to Judgecast with myself, Joe Bowden, and this guy,
Jay Taylor.
This week we are doing another one of our State of the Sitcom specials, and we are joined by Kobi from Flixwatcher.
Hello.
And also the podcast. Hello.
Sorry to interrupt you introducing both podcasts. Yes. Hi guys, how you doing?
Yeah, very well. And yourself?
Fantastic. It's we've gone past the Beast from the East Mark 1 and 2. And it's looking promising, so that's a great outlook for this. Well, we're recording at Easter. I don't know if people know that.
Yeah, genuinely smells of spring today. So
I feel like the Beast from the East will go down in history as an phenomenon.
I think phenomenon. So, Kobi, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Flixwatcher and the Wire Stripped podcast.
So, yeah, my name's Kobi. I have a couple. I have a fair few podcasts actually, but the most prominent ones, especially in terms of this Judgecast show, in terms of popular media, are the Flixwatcher podcast, where we watch films on Netflix in the UK, and our guests are other podcasters. So you guys should definitely come over. We've had Brightonians come over to London to record. So if you guys have time at any point, that'd be awesome to get you guys on.
Yeah.
And you guys would pick the films that we review and tell people who are listening, but basically whether they should bother watching it or not. Quite simple, and it's helped. We know it's helped a lot of people kind of navigate the mire of the Netflix algorithm, which can be unhelpful at best.
That's actually a great idea because there's just a bit too much content on there.
Yeah. I mean, as an example, my co-host Helen, she loves Noah Baumbach, and one of our guests chose The Squid and the Whale, which is one of Baumbach's early films. And her initial response was, "Holy shit, I didn't realize it was on there." So it's just like, how does it tell you what's the best way to get across the films that you like on there? And the answer, it seems, is it can't.
Yeah, it genuinely can. I mean, we watch a lot of those types of films, and we had no idea Squid and the Whale was on there. Thank you for letting us know. We'll be watching that again very soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. I suppose maybe what that tells us is that we're all just so unpredictable.
Yeah.
Maybe in light of recent events, that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, so for this particular episode, we said, what kind of sitcom would you like to talk about? We've kind of put it out there, lost some suggestions and things, and you suggested that our topic for today. Would you like to tell me what that is?
The topic for today is The Cosby Show.
We are going there.
We're definitely going there. It's well, I mean, I know for a fact that I grew up watching this in probably the 90s. I would imagine.
Okay.
The end of.
Yeah.
How did you get introduced to the show?
Well, I guess maybe should we say how old we are so we don't seem, I don't know, 'cause I'm 38, so I guess I watched it first run Channel 4. Yeah, was it even late 80s? But definitely during the 90s, it was a prevalent.
Yeah, I think it was
feature.
86, 92, the actual run.
Sure.
Yeah, that's in America. In the UK, obviously, would have been a bit later because everything sort of had a massive delay back then.
Because it didn't have the internet then, and
we're both 34, so we would have. I think I probably started watching it probably around 1990.
Yeah,
okay.
Start to like have choice over what I watched in the evenings. It wasn't just kids' telly. But grab the remote and have that kind of dexterity of thumb to do that.
So being that a bit older, what was your first exposure to the show?
Well, it's just you know you kind of watch what your parents put you in front of sometimes, don't you? So it wasn't one of those things where it wasn't like Blue Peter where we come on in school and put it on. So our parents must have just liked it and said, "Here's the Cosby Show," and it became like I think it was probably the show that we would watch as a family. And when we had our first VCR, it's the kind of thing we'd record like literally every episode and rewatch them a gajillion times. So pre Netflix and Amazon Prime kind of malarkey, and before TV box sets became a thing, we'd just record all these things.
Definitely, yeah. I remember it was definitely before kind of you bought box sets like that, because it would have been about 50 VHSs at the time.
It'd be so heavy.
It's crazy, isn't it? Absolutely crazy. And we loved it to bits. And when they came on DVD, it's kind of thing I bought from my parents as presents that they really did appreciate. And they used to take them on holiday with themselves and just sit down and watch a few episodes, and they really still enjoyed it. So it was one of those shows that just, transcended generations, I think. And people, yeah.
I think the thing the word I always associate with it from back then, it was quite unifying. It seemed to have something, whereas a lot of the shows that we watched as kids were very much, a child's sense of humour, something like Saved by the Bell or Boy Meets World. It was very much kids interacting with kids, and adults were quite, distant figures. Whereas this one, I do remember everyone being able to kind of laugh at all the different facets, and there was all different types of humour in there.
Yeah.
Well, there's somebody at pretty much every family age range in there. You've got, from the beginning, you've got like Rudy, who must be about like 4, I guess, right up to, Cliff Huxtable, who's, I don't know, I'm guessing in his early 50s.
Yeah.
And they pulled in Olivia when Rudy became too old to get that mix in.
Yeah, she was, and it was such a. I mean, for me, what I didn't realise was how much of an impact it had. For us, I think there was so much else going on in the zeitgeist at the time that we were starting to get into things. So in that early 90s period, whereas actually when you look back at it and the impact it had and how many spin-offs and everything that you kind of reference from it, and you almost forget how much you're referencing from the Cosby Show.
Yeah. One thing that's important to know as well is that I think it was shown at that time in the day where it wasn't kids' TV time, but it wasn't like you didn't have to ask your parents if you can stay up to watch it. So, like when I used to watch Cheers as a kid, and my parents would always be like, "Well, it's not really for your kind of age group, but hey, you can watch it because there's no swearing in it." And it wasn't, in the UK, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was shown when kids. It was like 5 o'clock at that kind of time. So
that kind of time,
So I don't know if it was a weekend when the Cosby Show came on or during the week, but it was that kind of. It must have been like 7 o'clock-ish time that seemed to be hit the mark where families would sit down together and watch the show together. And I think that was obviously really, really important to connecting people.
Yeah, I think connecting people is a really key kind of theme there, because I was thinking exactly what you just said about the Cheers thing, because we were doing a bit of research on it, and I didn't realise that at the time this came out in America, a lot of the papers, the media channels, and even the people in the industry were saying sitcoms are dead.
Right.
Let's focus on LA Law. Let's focus on Magnum PI. These types of prestige shows.
Magnum PI, prestige, in the same sentence.
At the time,
they might have felt that way. Yeah.
At the time, you're kind of Knight Riders, these big shows with a and the idea of a traditional family sitcom was dead. And I just found it really interesting that this came along at a time where you had sitcoms about alcoholism, very adult sitcoms.
Yeah.
It's about people with an alcohol addiction.
Mhm.
Aside from all the other stuff that happens there, they're all in a bar. Taxi was about people working in, kind of a low-paid job in it was very adult themes and situations. And I think, for something to come along that was so intergenerational, that's why I think it did as well as it is. It'd
be funny across for those generations, and not just sort of something that you can all watch, but actually everyone can get their humour.
Yeah, and also it did. I mean, before we go into, I'm sure the direction we're going to go into, it still does hold up in terms of good comedy. I'm trying to think of other sitcoms or even TV shows that stand up to that. And I remember we used to watch. Embarrassing, it pains me to say this now, but like Keeping Up Appearances.
Yeah, us too.
Used to watch that, and now I just shudder at the. It's just a ridiculous idea. This.
I don't know when we ever found it funny.
Yeah, I don't know why we found it funny. I don't know why we found it funny.
I don't even know if I did find it funny, if it was just on, because you only had 4 channels at the time.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just that it was on the same time as the news and the racing, and that was the most. Because, I mean, it's interesting that you say that point, Kobi, and as you say, we'd like to come back to it, but do you think that the comedy does still stand up? From a writing perspective, we'll take away all the kind of bigger picture with Bill Cosby that we will obviously touch on.
I really do. And a few years ago, I bought all the box sets. I don't think they were available in the UK, but multi-region DVD player and all that on Amazon, and I just went through a period of going through them all. I never actually made it through to the end in that rush in that period when I was watching them, but I just used to come back and watch like 3 or 4 episodes and just used to love them. And I was talking, I was kind of 30 about that time when I was doing that, and just really, really enjoyed it from start to where I kind of maybe petered off. So I think it does really work well. And like I said, when I bought them from my parents, they must have come out in the UK because my parents didn't have a multi-region DVD player. So when I bought them from my parents, they'd really appreciated and enjoyed them as well. So I think it did hold up really, really well.
It's kind of universal, really, because it's all about, family and the day-to-day sort of trials and tribulations. It's so relatable, no matter what era you're in, even though they're not holding mobile phones or whatever. It's the problems are still a lot of the same things that we see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just down to the pilot episode that doesn't start with any kind of someone walking in a wedding dress and everyone having to explain who they are. It is just you're straight in, and they've been doing that for years.
You see their evening routine, which I really like about that pilot. It's like
when did you rewatch the pilot?
When?
Very, very recently for this. We we'd like to go back and watch at least a fair few episodes in a run, and if there's any kind of major episodes for the sitcom, we go back and check them out. And so
I love that pilot because he has one less child in the pilot than he does for the rest of it.
Yeah.
And he makes a big statement for it. Why don't we have more? I can't remember what he says, but because we didn't want 5 as the answer.
And then suddenly there's a 5th.
Oh yeah. Uni.
It's like, have you forgotten or okay, pilot, fine.
Maybe she'd done something bad that week. But we found that so interesting to rewatch it, and in terms of the comedy, it's still funny.
It is, but I think what we were saying is a lot of it seems to be based on his stand-up routine before the show existed, and you can see that there's little points where he gets a little bit more to say that kind of it's almost like him having a moment of, well, I don't know, I guess in some families the dynamic is that dad has this kind of revered position where they can talk for a bit more and people listen. And we'll take that and run with it and do almost like a little slither of stand-up within it. Yeah, which you can see there's really kind of a nice angle to take. It's the same kind of way in that Aziz Ansari took with Master of None, that
Master of
having
None.
the ideas and then bringing them into the sitcom.
Which we need to talk about, yeah. Well, I think from the US, certainly, I'm thinking of maybe obviously Friends and Cheers didn't really follow this realm, but a lot of the sitcoms in the US were based around a comedian and built a sitcom or a program around them. So Seinfeld, Everybody Loves Ray,
Home Improvement.
Home Improvement, yeah, totally.
Roseanne. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Whereas in the UK, it was, I don't know, we maybe have Fawlty Towers was built around John Cleese. But the writing was kind of built from a different base, really. And it seemed to be better in the UK. It seemed to be writer led. So you had a few, especially we saw them in the 80s, I guess. But the things like Dad's Army those guys who wrote Dad's Army wrote a shit ton of sitcoms in the UK, and they kind of built a character from there. But it was flipped around in the majority, I think, in the US. Or based around one single person, Will Smith being, in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, for example, even though he wasn't a comedian, it was like all around him.
It was almost basically a star vehicle kind of, going to launch. Yeah, I think I would tend to agree that. And I did try to do a bit of research, and there are a few, Andy Kaufman was cast in Taxi, but this was the first one I really knew of where it was a sitcom, a stand-up star who had already had albums and everything out, whose then writing was really the part of the show that, and obviously the rest grew into themselves and grew into become household names. But as you say, it was this stand-up led sitcom. I think it really comes across. We were watching the episode with the fish.
The dead fish.
The dead fish. Lamont's funeral. Yeah. And it really shone how much of it was a stand-up routine that had been honed, and even down to the very first episode where he has the conversation with his son
Theo. Yeah,
you can again kind of see elements of that from a stand-up of this father who's frustrated with his child, and then they just turned it into excellent that scene still holds up for both. The fact that you get applause for Theo's speech, and then you get even louder applause for the fact that he turns around and says, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard."
Just gets properly shut down.
Yeah.
It's a bit like a tug of war. I feel like that. Like they've both got like ends of the rope, and they're kind of giving each other a little bit with the counting out of the money and stuff. Like there's a real lovely rhythm and sort of partnership in that conversation. So beautifully written,
and so kind of. Yeah, again, we said the word, unifying, connecting. Every child can remember the time when whether it was about grades or whether it was about money, they're being talked down to, and they want to be respected for their own decisions. But then you've got the parent going, "I know better."
I've been there.
Yeah, those conversations where you kind of always prepare yourself. You haven't written it down anywhere.
Yeah, but
you know what you're going to say if a situation arises.
Exactly.
You maybe rehearsed it in your mind, and then I remember going to my dad one day and saying, "Dad, I just want to be happy," feeling that was yes. Yeah. And then he just went to me, "What does that mean, though?"
Yeah,
I was like, I don't know.
Literally that far ahead.
It made sense when I wrote it.
Yes. So, I mean, you referenced the pilot when you said about a wedding dress coming into a cafe, and obviously that's talking about the Friends pilot. And that's something that's just come to Netflix, actually, in the UK, the entire season of Friends. And a few of my friends were like joyous about it when it came to Netflix. And I just kind of thought, I don't really want to do that.
I want to go there.
I don't really. Even though I loved it when it came, when it kind of came out, but I just thought, no, I'm not really into it.
Yeah, and they definitely go down the whole path of the introduction way, like, we are Rachel in that episode. When they all are, kind of thing. And Cosby does that so differently, and that's become almost like a map for all films. I think that's
how you start
entrance thing. Yeah.
And I think Friends falters. I mean, I think maybe we should just step into the Cosby thing.
It was going to be my next question. I feel like we've talked around it enough.
So Friends kind of falters in a way that I think just some of the things that they show on the show, you just wouldn't do anymore. Yeah. Like the Fat Monica thing.
It's aged terribly.
Yeah, some parts of it really badly. I mean, take, like the fat, ugly naked guy, I remember laughing my ass off.
Yeah.
But now I just kind of think that's actually really bad.
It's really mean, yeah.
Yeah. And, making fun of, they didn't know whether Chandler was gay or not. And that was a whole kind of episode or two.
There's almost like a homophobic slur in almost every episode. It's I don't remember it being that kind of cultural comedy at the time. It just almost seemed like the writers on this were like, no, this is funny.
Yeah.
It's quite painful watching it now.
Yeah.
Like, as I say, we've been doing research for another episode of this State of the Sitcom, and it's interesting watching something, and exactly like you mean, where you just the tastes have changed and
quickly, but thankfully. But
just laughing at the ugly naked fat guy, laughing at even the whole Monica storyline, and now you're just going, they're just laughing at her because she was fat as a child. Like it's
so that's one reason. So I'm not so keen on watching. I mean, I'm sure there's some episodes that I'll still think that's just genius, because I think that at the time they were trying to be kind-hearted. It's just with hindsight, it just wasn't. Yeah, you wouldn't do that. That wouldn't happen nowadays. The Cosby Show, on the other hand, has got a different, altogether more sinister reason why you perhaps won't want to watch it, and that's because of Bill Rapey Cosby.
Yes. That's his. Yeah.
Is that his official name?
His official.
I think so. How did you guys first find out about this darker side of Bill Cosby?
Oh, I'm not sure about first. It's sort of kind of evolved over the last few years. I felt like it's just
shocked.
Very gradually eked out more and more information.
Yeah, I was shocked when I found out that it was first announced in 2015. I thought it was only last year. Like, it feels like so much has happened in the last year that it's almost kind of become. But yeah, no, his allegations. I think we did find out about it around then, which is 3 years ago, and I can't remember how many it was. Whether it was a single allegation at first, or whether it was a lawsuit. And I know there's now 40 plus people that have accused him of a variety of different.
40 plus now.
I'm pretty sure that's what I read today, and I know a couple of the court cases have not gone. So he's not been found guilty, but then there's still many more to come. I think there's more starting this month, or April or May. It's difficult.
It's just gutting.
It's exactly the word. I think it was such a cultural touch point. And
he played such a fatherly, trustworthy figure that we all kind of just, we all just sort of adored this character.
Well, listen to how we've all just talked about the show for the last 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We all obviously had a connection, and it's that word connection again. And so for then to someone to have, and it's the same with, we've had it as children of the 80s and the 70s, with many people that we watched every day or weekend being, accused of a lot of things, and many found guilty. So you've got Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, and countless others. And when it is someone from your childhood that you had such a connection with, it's very difficult to.
I find it interesting. I mean, there's I think like a big question we're heading towards, but I think as you said, because we were all children at the time, there is a different connection. And then there's been a lot of media focus, I think, on the women, or at the time, kids who were in the Cosby Show and their reactions now to the court cases, to the allegations, and I feel like that's really strange, because if we all feel a bit like, oh my God, that guy, like they knew him, they worked with him most days, like had a really close relationship to him. And so, and they've had differing reactions. I think most people have basically said, I'm going to wait and see what happens in court.
Exactly, I think.
And some people have been really like supporting with him and going with him to the court cases and stuff. But it's not their fault that he's done those things.
No.
Oh, no, exactly. And that's one of the main reasons for still wanting to watch the show. Because it's not just, I mean, going back a step, actually, because I first found out about this allegations, I should say. I think it's like 2014 on Twitter. Wow. And he'd just been on one of the late night shows, and I can't remember which show he was on, Letterman, whatever. And someone said, why didn't you ask him about his rape allegations?
Whoa.
And I was like, whoa, hello.
Yeah.
And then I started doing a bit, just cursory digging then. And, that something surfaced then, but I just thought, I'm not sure about this. So to see it slowly unfold, and then And then your man Hannibal Buress, who's again one of my favorite comedians, he just called him out hard on one of his shows that was all over YouTube. And that really was like a call to action for a lot of people and myself. Hannibal, you know, is one of those people like Hannibal and Aziz are like two, for me, one of the best comedians, you know, young comedians at the moment. I think they're so well-grounded, sound people. It's, you know, the kind of people you would love to have a drink with.
Absolutely.
And for him to come out and say those kind of things really did make me think, you know, shit, there is fire and there is smoke at the same time.
It's so hard because you do. I think you do go for. I definitely went through a period with the Louis C.K. thing of. I knew that the allegations have been there for years.
Yeah.
I mean, since I think the 2000s at least. You know, I was a huge fan of his. I watched, you know, all the shows, all the sitcoms.
I've seen him live twice.
I saw the kind of his thing on stand-up and writing comedy, and I just, you know, it was such an inspiration for us as writers as well, and the Aziz Ansari as well, watching something that was such an inspiration. And so when it does happen, your thought process is so skewed.
And with Louis C.K., when he did, I mean, he's one of the few people that said, yeah, I'm a creep, basically. And in his, I'm not sure if it's full in apology letter, but he did, I mean, I can't remember what the name of his film that was due to come out, but he had a fair few people in there I was looking forward to seeing just because these are the people. And I just felt sorry for them because you guys are right. It takes a hell of a lot of time and effort and energy to make a TV show or a film, and for it to go down because someone in Louis C.K.'s instance has got his knob out and had a wank into a fighting whatever, you know, it's just like, I can't emote it enough is the sound.
Yeah, and the thing is, you know, we're disappointed and however it affects us as just consumers of media and stuff is one thing, but when all this, the beginning of Me Too and everything, I was doing a lot of reading around all of this, and then someone just said, no matter how we feel as people who are fans of people, think about what the survivors, what they're going through.
Exactly.
That you know, it is and that was like, whoa, that was a really big moment of like, shit, I've been really privileged in the way that I've looked at this, and it's that age-old question of, does their actions, alleged or proven, mean that we cannot enjoy the media that they have previously made, and how far does it skew our opinion of that? It's definitely something that's been coming up in a lot of our zeitgeist. We're going, how far do I take my aversion to this person?
Exactly. Yeah, and especially because, unfortunately, with the situations, even with Bill Cosby, as it was 2014, there's still allegations, and this is where a lot of the cast members are finding it difficult because they're still having to say, look, I can't say anything until I know what the outcome of a court case is, because that's the only, they didn't see anything. You know, someone like Ray said that all that he was is someone that gave her a career and was everything but lovely to her, gave her advice. It's so difficult in terms of their position as well. Talking about that, Kobi, and the wider situation with Bill Cosby's allegations, you said that your family especially, so you had this kind of united family, you watched it, you bought it for your parents. What impact has it had on you and your viewing of the show?
So I'm not taught with my parents about this, so this is just myself. I think one thing I should say, I mean, I'm black and my parents, I was born in Nigeria. My dad's a doctor. I've got two younger brothers growing up. So we really, really felt really connected to it in that kind of way, in a fair few ways. And I'm not sure, I don't think my dad would say that he emulated Bill Cosby, but I'm sure he did some things that he was like, yeah, I'm a doctor, I'm the head of this house, and blah, blah, blah. And we kind of let him slide on a few things. So we really did. It was really kind of a family thing, and not that the race part of it is that big a deal, but I think we just did resonate with us a lot more than other sitcoms, even Fresh Prince or Saved by the Bell. I can't. It's not an answer just for the Cosby Show. It's how do I view Michael Jackson? How do I view Louis C.K.? Jimmy Savile, I didn't care for much anyway, so that's fine. Rolf Harris, I was gutted when Rolf Harris was like involved in Project U Tree. I still haven't found an answer, and now with the Me Too side of things, like even Casey Affleck, I'm like, dude, I love I've loved the things you've been in. I can't find an answer apart from the fact I'd love to be able to say, I like his work in The Ghost Story. I like his work I like The Cosby Show. I like Louis, the sitcom. And I still want to enjoy them, but I just can't really watch them in the same way I did before. And I think there might be slightly different if it wasn't in this time and age where there's so much great stuff out there else to watch. Maybe I could just go, well, let's just watch these other things because there's lots of great stuff out there. So I don't feel the need to reach out for the DVD box sets of The Cosby Show. But
I think that's a really interesting, especially from people that are going through and trawling through. The biggest change to our TV and film watching habits is Netflix. So as people that are going through this and hearing, realizing your own thoughts, but also lots of other people's thoughts on the content that is on there. And it's exactly like you were saying with Friends. For a lot of people, it is just an odd thing of going, well, have you seen Love? Have you seen The Good? Have you seen Master of None? Have you seen Rick and Morty? Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I mean, which is actually really old now, but we've been rewatching some Friends for this show. But yeah, there is a part of me that sometimes when we were watching Cosby Show and I'm there going, I'm enjoying this, and there's a research thing and there's a kind of focus. But I wouldn't choose to be because, you know, there was Annihilation that just come onto Netflix and Jeff Jones had just come onto Netflix, and they're going, I really want to watch these.
I found it interesting that I was a little bit, not against it. I was a little bit like, I'm not sure if I want to rewatch episodes. Can I do it based on my memories? I was like, no, I cannot do it based on my memories. No. That's crazy. Yeah, and actually I was surprised at how much I still enjoyed it. If I could just sort of, it's like the pictures we see in the media of Bill Cosby are not the Cliff Huxtable that we see on the TV.
Yeah,
no.
I feel really uncomfortable in a way of like describing this, but I was trying to appreciate it purely on what it was at the time. But there is an element, there's a part of you cannot take away.
You watch it thinking, was he raping about this kind of time in this?
Exactly, and I think it hits on something that, you know, we've kind of touched on, but the fact that it was called The Cosby Show, but the family's name was the Huxtables.
Oh, yeah.
Always odd because
that has never occurred to me.
But you should be able to disassociate yourselves, because at the time, just before he was making The Cosby Show, he was also starring in some, you know, they're not blaxploitation films, but they're very, you know, down and out New York strip.
Well, him and Sidney Poitier used to do a lot of films together.
And so there was a different. If you watch them, if you watch them, you didn't just know Bill Cosby as this fatherly figure. Everyone thinks they know Louis C.K.'s life because he talks about his children. It's an enhanced version of his life. There are elements of, yes, he had that conversation with his children, but then he turned it into a bit. It's not actually real life. Ricky Gervais is very good at doing that, of making it seem like he's just talking exactly how he talks, whereas it's a fake Ricky Gervais. We all think Aziz Ansari is Aziz Ansari. He's not. It's Master of None Aziz. And I think that's a really dangerous thing for these types of comedians. It's difficult to disassociate Cliff Huxtable and Bill Cosby, because for us, definitely, well, me and you, we've never really seen him in anything else.
No.
I've never seen the Sidney Poitier films. I've never seen his stand-up, really. The most I knew was Eddie Murphy doing an impression of Bill Cosby's stand-up. That's,
I think I've heard some of his stand-up, and I didn't find it that funny.
No.
So I never kind of went there. I was just kind of thinking, I was like, that's maybe a 60s, 70s kind of, you know, that's what passed for comedy then. Still love your show, but I'm not going to do your stand-up. Whereas like Louis, I loved his show. Well, at least the one that's on FX, and I loved his stand-up. And it's like Aziz is the same kind of thing. I loved his stand-up, loved his show. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that.
The Aziz one was so interesting for us because we watched Master of None, and then we started watching some of the live specials on Netflix, and you just see him do the whole conversation he has with his dad on Master of None. Yeah, but a stand-up bit. Yeah, and it was like. This is what he just talked about. It was amazing seeing that writing process. It's been hard with you referenced Louis and Aziz, and I think we've kind of covered all the angles on
those kind of things.
how you can feel with that.
It's almost like whenever I sort of start on this subject, it's like a heaviness that forms between my two eyebrows.
Yeah.
I don't really know
No.
how to sort of enunciate how I feel clearly and to still kind of watch all the stuff, and it's so much to take on board. And
there is, I mean, every time I hear conversations or read about it, people have a different angle. I don't know, are we kind of looking, maybe we're looking for a kind of get out of jail free card where someone says, yeah, you know, watch all the stuff you like. Maybe we're just conflicted in that way. We want to watch it, but at the same time we know bad stuff has happened around these people. So are we looking for someone to say it's fine to watch it, go on, do it?
I like to think that most of the time, whenever I hear these allegations, I'm exactly where Joe said, that my thoughts are with the survivors and victims, and then whatever happens with the court case, etc., happens, and then I can make my judgment. You hit the nail on the head where there's so many that I don't really have a problem with, like Jimmy Savile or things like that, because
you have a problem with.
No. I have a problem with the enjoyment.
Right, just I thought we better make that clear.
Yeah. I do have a problem with it. yeah. Sorry, that was me being it. But like, so for me, the big one, the one that I find hits me the most is Michael Jackson. For me, was such a huge part of my growing up. The albums, the tapes, the music videos,
just Moonwalker,
everything from
the video game.
Yeah, for about 10 years of my life, I lived and I listened to those tapes till they were worn out.
Did you try the lean in Smooth Criminal, like onto your bed to see if you
all
could?
The time.
So many times I used to get people to try and hold my ankles.
Yeah, the dance moves. It was such a cultural touchstone. So those ones for me, and it's like you said about Louis for You and things like that, where I do almost want a get out of jail free time, because there's sometimes Michael Jackson song will come up in a Spotify playlist that I've made on a Friday, and I'll be singing and dancing around the kitchen, and just then if someone referenced it,
So does he actually sing and dance around the kitchen? I want verification on this.
Oh God, so much.
I'm pretty good at working day and night. I can do that dance move.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's if someone was to then stand to me while I was dancing and say, "Oh, so enjoying a child molest," it hits you really hard at home then, and it's during that point when you're not aware of it, and it just grabs you around and hits you again, and you just go, "Shit!"
You remember it all over again. Yeah.
Shit, I was enjoying it again.
Sorry, I don't know why I'm laughing.
It's that nervous laughter.
Yeah. There's a couple of ace documentaries I've seen recently. One is on Netflix I think it's called Seeing Allred, about Gloria Allred, who I've never heard of before. We've talked about Netflix recommending stuff to you. Netflix knows I love documentaries, and this one was great. I'd never heard of her before, but she has represented a lot of the female injustices. She's representing a lot of the Cosby victims. Oh wow! For want of a better word, including one lady who was actually in the Cosby Show as she was pregnant in the show, and she was one of the victims, which kind of also brings it hard. And like, was Cosby like using this as a farming technique to grooming technique? That documentary is really good and interesting, so I'd recommend that. I think it's called Seeing Allred.
Okay.
I've been watching just recently all of the O.J. Simpson Made in America documentaries.
The documentary is not the dramatization that was on.
No, I've seen the dramatization as well.
Yeah.
What's the documentary that goes into so much more depth, and it's fantastic. And you see people still conflicted there with O.J. People who were his friends and were just saying, "Yeah, we know he did it." And then they're 10 years later still hanging out with him. Then it's something he says that makes them dive out of wanting contact with him finally. So for those guys, that's what we're experiencing, dialed up to 11 to stupid, as Mark Kermode would say.
Yeah. And I suppose in terms of both OJ and Cosby, because I know I've read, I think it was a New York Times article. It was definitely a American Broad paper. And they were highlighting the interesting thing of, because these were such prominent African American role models, that then it's often even harder for certain people in communities and so to accept it, because it's it's like no, you've done so much progress. If you now if you bring this crashing down, where's all that progress gone? Has that all of that been tainted? And I found that really interesting. I'll link when we put the podcast up to it, because it very interesting realization of like this show and Bill Cosby in general as a stand-up with Richard Pryor paved the way for, I mean, pretty much every with Eddie Murphy, with Kevin Hart, with so many stand-ups, and with OJ as well. You know, this household name, this huge sports star, advertiser. There is another facet to it as well, and it's as big an issue because it's taking into account such a personal thing for them, for the communities as well. That that another part is to play with that we've never even thought about. Just as lovers of media, say it's.
I think it's important also to say with what OJ allegedly did and what Bill Cosby has allegedly done is that these aren't, Cosby's got 40 plus names on his list.
Yes.
OJ Simpson has allegedly brutally killed 2 people, and the description of what he allegedly did is horrific. This wasn't an accident. Didn't actually run them over in a fit of rage. He was there for it. Whoever killed him, I should say, was there for an extended period of time and went to town on it. And the fact that for OJ in particular, the fact that he won was bigger than OJ. It was, off the back of Rodney King, the LA riots, and all these things. It's a shame that those things have to play a part, but also, they just had to.
Yeah, it's inevitable. Is it? Michael Jackson was a similar thing of
Well, anybody who's got a platform and a pedestal, like a lot of celebrities when they first become celebrities have to suddenly deal with this concept of being a role model, and it's not necessarily why they would have gone into what they've done, but it's and so there's all everything that a celebrity does is microscoped. It's multiplied. And so it has a cultural influence no matter what.
Still heavy-hearted.
It is, and I think we're talking about the state of sitcom, and it's got very heavy-hearted. So let's
go back to the sitcom side,
and maybe focus a little bit more on the com than the sit.
Nice. That was very nice.
So which episodes did you rewatch, guys?
We watched the first few of season 1. We had to watch the classic season 2, episode 5, the wedding anniversary. Which
wedding anniversary is this? That one.
It's his parents' anniversary.
Oh, okay.
Performance for them with the
Ray Charles.
Day. Yeah, and oh my god,
which is one I remember very much.
Because they do that a few times. But this is where Rudy. Is that when Cliff leads Rudy out from behind the stairs and she goes into. Yeah.
I love it.
It's still it was again, it was that type of comedy that just we were both just smiling from ear to ear when she was doing it. And really, Theo,
really accessible comedy as well.
Theo's performance, Ray Charles is, I know Jamie Foxx gets a lot of the accolades, but Theo coming down those stairs doing proper Ray Charles, I was suitably impressed.
Yeah.
Malcolm Jamal Walker. So he played. This is a bit of a segue back to the to O.J. Simpson, but he played O.J. Simpson's friend in the dramatization.
Made in America, yeah.
Yeah, he played the guy that was driving the Bronco down in the low-speed chase, A.C. Collins.
Pick up on that.
Because we were trying to work out. We both went, I know he's been doing something recently, and we realised that we knew him as...
He's Shirley's husband in Community as well.
Yeah.
Which is good. He's still, still keeping modern sitcoms.
He wears a Cosby sweater in Community.
I think
I mean, like, not. It doesn't say Cosby. He wears the Bill Cosby type jumping.
Yeah, the old 80s pattern thing.
So it's been very interesting going back and watching, and we tried to find the final episode, but we couldn't find it anywhere without going illegal, and we don't like to do that. So
Yeah, from what I remember, I think I've only seen that once. I don't think it was that interesting.
No,
Oh, okay, that's all right then.
I don't remember it going out with a bang. But you know, so many sitcoms have the final one and the big ending and
Yeah.
I don't think it. But how would it? It's such a normal start and the whole run. The comedy comes from very everyday situations. It's not going to be a chase to the airport. It's not going to be a final show where is he going to Seattle or is he going to Chicago?
Yeah, it's not going to be a final kiss that.
Yeah. How to keep him up appearances then?
No idea.
3 minutes bathtub rolling down the hill.
No, that's Last of the Summer Wine.
Oh, that's still bloody going.
I think they were on after each other.
But yeah, it's definitely. I think that is its strongest point, is being able to watch it back, and the premise of, and we keep bringing up Friends, but the premise of the Friends episodes where this happened, you didn't really have that in Cosby. It was a bad report card, but lots of other stuff going out. It was a fish dying, but lots of other stuff going out. It was a wedding anniversary, but lots of other. There was always just. It wasn't a big through line.
I don't know. You would have things like, I remember when, is it Theo who got somebody pregnant, or was one of the daughters pregnant?
No, Theo did get anyone pregnant.
Yeah.
I remember that being, I mean, maybe it's just in my household, but I remember that being quite a big deal, and that I think it covered a few episodes.
There's a few things that cropped up, and also, I mean, because it's a family show and because it was started in the 80s, you always had these kind of moral themes through things, in the way that He-Man had that kind of tail at the end that said, "Don't do drugs."
Oh yeah.
You're like, none of this episode had anything to do with drugs, so what are you talking about? But there's that episode of the Cosby Show, for example, where there's someone puts a joint in one of Theo's textbooks, and they kind of they treat it responsibly. Like Cliff's like, look, you can't shield your kids from it, and he says, like, you could go to the Arctic Circle and there'll be penguins there with like spliffs hanging out their mouths. You just can't do it. And there's episodes where you have special stars when people come into it and they're talking about their family. There's one episode when one of Theo's friends from college comes in and he's looking at the Huxtable family, saying they're all so great, and then he starts crying and then saying that his daughter's succumbed to some kind of drug. I can't remember what it was. These things happen. So there's things that, there's kind of moral touch points that they do hit. That really, but then you have things like the Gordon Gartrell shirt, where Theo wants to get that shirt that costs like £100, and his sister says, "No, I can make it for you. It's gonna, for nothing." Yeah, she just can't do it. There are some outstanding points here, but there's not like the one where thing happens.
I think they did touch. I think it unfairly gets maligned because it wasn't a political show, and I'm doing inverted commas in the air there. It very much just went, no, we're actually just going to focus on day-to-day lives of
we're a family
different
of people,
different generations.
Yeah,
but
it's like family that happens to be black.
Exactly. But in saying that, it also, rewatching some of the episodes, and they really didn't pander to racial stereotypes, which in itself is a big step.
A big deal back then.
That's a big. Yeah, it is still. It's still, and that's what I think is so relevant. Is I didn't realise that Cosby was quite instrumental in casting Felicia Rashad.
Right.
Because during the not interview, what they called it, audition with Theo, a lot of the other actors that had been with Theo did a kind of head shake, hand on the hip, whereas she just stared at him in a kind of very motherly, "No, I'm going to stare at you until you back down because I am right." And he just went, "That's what we want. We don't want the kind of stereotypical..."
Well, those actors were probably doing what they thought that people wanted.
So in terms of that, it was progressive in a lot of ways, but it just didn't do the kind of heart on the sleeve, which I think maybe in a time with Reagan and stuff like that, people wanted, or some communities wanted.
There's one episode I remember quite vividly, where I think Theo had to do a term paper on the March on Washington, which is where Martin Luther King did his "I Have a Dream" speech.
Yeah.
He, gives it to his dad to have a look at, and he's like, "You should have asked us because we were there. we saw him speak live," and it ends in such a powerful way when they're replaying the speech. Everything just kind of stops, and they're just looking at looking at a replay of Martin Luther King doing his "I Have a Dream" speech. So it was in there every now and again, but the race kind of thing wasn't. It just wasn't a big part of it. And one day, I think Cliff's dad, who I love, Earl Hyman.
Oh yeah,
he's talking about being in the war with other black soldiers, and then popping the lid on the tank, and the Germans are like, "What? What's going on?" Yeah. So there were things in there certainly, but and
I think it's
progressive
as comedy. It's all the better for it because there is fantastic progressive political comedy. In terms of what this was setting out to do and the writing teams behind it, it did what it was best at doing, and that was a situation family comedy. And I think it still stands up because of that. And bizarrely, or worryingly, should I say, it's still progressive in a way. There are still so many shows that do unfortunately fall into the trappings of stereotyping. You only have to turn on some of the big sitcoms at the moment, Mrs. Brown's Boys and stuff like that you still think, really? Are we still laughing?
Yeah.
Is a man in a
Who
dress?
commissioned this?
Is a man in a dress still funny? And it's interesting.
I hope they'll die by the wayside. I remember you guys were talking about Black Panther, weren't you?
Yeah.
I can't remember what you said about it, but I did a podcast episode talking about that, and I was saying that as a kid growing up, for me, as a black kid growing up, when I grew up, there's so many other people. My best friends were like Pakistani and Iranian and other things like that. So the fact that different races were around, it just wasn't really a thing. It wasn't like, I need to be with these guys because they have the same skin tone as me. It's just like, let's all hang out together. Yeah. For me, so growing up, I had the Cosby Show, had Desmond's, which is one of my favorite TV shows, had Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but also at the same time we were watching Saved by the Bell, and so for me it was just like part of the kind of scope of what's on TV. And I was saying we did the show, it was on the show that Cinemile, I'm not sure if you heard of it. With Dave, we did the Cinemile on the Black Panther, and I was saying, for me actually growing up, there was kind of representation on TV, but I feel that in Black Panther's case, it did an excellent job in terms of the female representation, which I still think is not that prevalent even today. Yeah. And I still feel there's still not that good a platform for people who aren't black or white on TV. Aziz Ansari is one of the few people I can think of, Nish Kumar in the UK probably as well, who are from that part of Asia, or traditionally from that part of Asia. There's not that much in the way of people who are from like Southeast Asia or Latin America making way on stuff. And I just think there needs to be get everyone included on this stuff together, more than is being done. It's great that people recognize it more, but I still think there's a long way to go to get everyone included as much as possible.
Completely agree.
Frances McDormand said it, inclusion rider. There's a reason
world that is around us.
There's a reason she said that, and Black Panther is a fantastic. I thought it was a fantastic film. Just as a film, I'm aside from the all of the progressive stuff as well, just in its merits as a film, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the fact that I think yesterday it was announced that it is now beaten Avengers Assemble and Avengers Age of Ultron, and it's now the highest grossing superhero film of time. I think it's only second or third to Avatar and Titanic. That.
I hope it beats Avatar. I'm not bothered about Avatar.
That's going to change the industry in ways that we can only imagine, and that's fantastic. And I think
studios will start to see that it's not because studios do obviously look at things in terms of money.
Of course they do. Yeah,
they are a company at the end of the day, and as much as I disagree with this, but they are starting to see that money can also be made by representing people. It's just a very sad state of affairs for that to be the justification.
But what I don't want is the knee-jerk reaction that like DC studios have done and gone, oh shit,
Quick.
right, you guys have done
Yeah.
you've done studio after studio film and it's big, so let's just throw our superheroes into a film because that's what people
Exactly.
want. Let's make it, just make them good first.
Absolutely. No, couldn't agree more. And yeah.
I was going to say, so what other sitcoms, let's go back to the state of the sitcom, what other sitcoms were big for you this kind of time, this kind of era?
Well, you highlighted Cosby Show and Desmond's were big for you. For me, it was Desmond's and Fresh Prince, which I still quote Fresh Prince. It was such a huge part of...
Jay can make himself cry on cue because of Fresh Prince.
It's a very...
It's got such an emotional connection.
It really has.
And I don't use it. I honestly... I totally...
But yeah, and I think for me, I wasn't massive into Friends. I only watched Frasier as an adult. There was something about Fresh Prince specifically that just
resonated.
It grabbed me in such a way, and still does. And as a young boy in Gravesend in Kent in the UK, I loved. So most other people were listening to Nirvana and Stone Roses type of stuff. I loved Arrested Development and De La Soul. That was my.
Well, so the type font of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was like game set match for you.
It kind of ticked all the boxes that there was familiar tropes and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's shaped my viewing, and with the Cosby Show as well, which I did see. And as you said, all the shit BBC stuff that was on at the time with appearances and
I used to watch Dad's Army with my
Dad's
granddad.
Army,
Dad's Army. I think Dad's Army is all right. I think ones I've seen, at least, when the wheel had the best clips of the 60s and 70s show, Dad's Army's got a few.
Dad's Army is a well-written series.
When you put it next to Keeping Up Appearances,
And I think even in general, it also tackles a pretty difficult time.
Yeah.
Far better than something like Hello, Hello, which somehow
to
be in,
because Hello, Hello was being made in the 80s as we were growing up, whereas Dad's Army, I think, was a 60s, 70s thing. Yeah, it was still on every week.
Every single week.
Yeah. So let Hello, Hello. That's a classic one. That's one where I think now is like, what were you doing? That's xenophobic. There's a transvestite Luftwaffe officer. I can't remember it wasn't Luftwaffe.
I don't know what they were thinking.
His Air Flick.
Air Flick.
Yeah, and you had Vicky Michelle and Yvette always like half naked in lingerie. And I was thinking, what's the matter with you?
And the production values were so poor as well. It was just like, is this a pantomime on telly?
US listeners listening, if you haven't seen Hello, Hello, don't.
Just take our word for it.
But that was something we just watched every week, and now I'm thinking about I'd be thinking now, why are we watching this? Let's put on BoJack Horseman.
We had a big one on our house was Only Fools and Horses.
Oh, of course. There you go. Lovely. Lovely.
And now, like growing up, I used to enjoy it and stuff. But looking back at it now, there are some questionable jokes and perspectives, and obviously all the things that change. Like in the same way that when we were talking about rewatching Cosby and Friends, like values have changed so much, thankfully.
Yeah.
So looking back at that, sometimes you're just like, oh my god. But
then also, in terms of representing a very
underrepresented people.
Yeah, real kind of. I don't want to use the word working class because they weren't. The whole show was the premise that they weren't working. But in terms of that, it actually was, and I think there are jokes in it that are very clever. It was a well-written show to go on for as long as it did.
It needed to probably end a little bit sooner. Maybe about 20 years sooner.
When it came back for the final 3 episodes for Christmas, it was just like, oh no, guys.
Yeah, I didn't watch those.
Should have stopped when he fainted.
And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, where sometimes you have to just realise, you know what? There's 1,000 other shows being made this year
that you wouldn't have time to watch.
Yeah, do I need to sit and watch a reboot of a show that I didn't even really like that much as it was ending, or even while it was on? And there's this. I think there's a kind of, because the news pick up on stuff. You go, oh, there's a new album out by this, and you go, I don't care. I don't want to hear a new album by the Pixies. I didn't really like any other albums by the Pixies apart from one, when I was 14. And it's an odd thing that you kind of get swept up.
Well, on that note, I mean, obviously, it not in the classic sense, but does the Cosby Show with a different title, would it work if it was rebooted, obviously without Cosby? But if they were to redo that premise, is that something that you think that would work now?
Or has it already been made? Is there something on that you would say is a spiritual counterpart to the Cosby?
Well, maybe the nearest I can think of is F is for Family, Bill Burr's animated comedy sitcom, but that's very Bill Burr and very sweary, so maybe not.
I've seen that on Netflix, and we haven't watched. I've seen it that it is on there, but I've not.
Yeah.
Well, if you like Bill Burr's voice, which I do, then it's fun. It's fun enough. I don't think it's as funny as for me as BoJack. I know you're doing an animated sitcom show as well.
BoJack gets a lot of love.
But BoJack for me is outstanding, and it's one of the things I kind of rewatch every now and again, just knowing I can watch one episode and be done for a couple of weeks and just think I'll just watch the next episode. I can't think because you said in the sorry to burst the illusion, listeners, but we often think about notes and how we prepare for the podcast episodes. But you said about Will and Grace coming back.
Yeah, that's the successful one, isn't it? Yeah.
Is that doing well? Because I think I was on a plane on holiday, and they had the reissue of Will and Grace. I never used to watch Will and Grace much anyway. It was kind of if it was on after Friends finished, or I'd maybe watch it, and I know all the characters, but it never really
I'm
exactly the
same here. And we haven't watched any of the new season yet.
You've caught us
but
out.
I've heard critically it's been quite lauded.
It's been renewed.
Okay,
Has
good.
it?
I'm sure it's done well enough that it's...
What I like about it is that it kind of came about because they just went, it's relevant again. We've got something to say with Trump.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it. We've got it all recorded, but we haven't
not seen any of it yet. So I watched the first kind of 15 minutes. It didn't really hit me, but I think you need to have a flow with these things now. And now how TV works is that, going back to the state of the sitcom before I go back into the next thing, have you seen The Good Place?
Yes. We haven't finished season 2, though.
I'm not going to spoil it, but that for me is like the perfect mesh of sitcom plus like an ongoing storyline. And you just don't see that in the sitcom anymore. And with all the TV shows that we've talked about, Prince, Cosby Show, because of just how it was in the 80s, you could quite easily miss a few episodes in the season and not realise. And
you can come in anywhere, really.
Yeah. I used to watch loads of Nickelodeon growing up, and I would just sort of pick up an episode no matter where it was at. And
everything reverts back. Maybe they have a double episode one in a while.
Yeah.
But
that was a special thing when it's a continuing story over 2 episodes. It was like, wow, like the 80s continuing next episodes.
But I think you hit the nail on the head there with Good Places. I don't remember it ever being done where a sitcom every single week, well, up until we've seen it, which is about halfway through season 2, every single week has a cliffhanger ending that you then have to be resolved the next week.
Yeah.
I don't remember any series doing that. Every sitcom I watched, as you say, just was almost like The Simpsons, where the one character could get run over and next week they're fine.
The only series I can think of that properly committed to that was 24, which is such a different style of show. But it's a really nice hybrid to make.
Talk about Will and Grace coming back, but also I'm actually really quite excited to see the new incarnation of Roseanne.
Yes, me too. Yeah,
that's coming from a similar Trumpian angle as well. And I used to really enjoy Roseanne, and that was one of the ones where I had to say, my parents would say, "Okay, it's a bit later on a Friday, but it's fine to watch it." But I think Roseanne Barr's got a lot to say, and she's one of the people who really stuck it into Louis C.K. as well.
Very vocal.
She's been banging that drum, I think, for quite a few years, long before it. Yeah, I'm really intrigued to see where they take that, because obviously it didn't end very well. That whole "it was all the dream" thing is so cliche.
Can you think of any decent sitcom finishing?
I like the Frasier ending. I don't think the last season is its strongest, but I think the Frasier ending kind of ties together a lot of things, gives everyone a nice send-off, and then, crucially, doesn't affect its core character. So he is unchanged. He is exactly the same as he is.
He's incapable of change.
Yeah, and I think that's quite nice in that they show that emotionally he's grown, but they don't have him settled down with they show that he's still this person desiring something, and I like the Frasier ending, but it's not standout. It's just
What about for you?
I can't. I've just literally rewatched all of Seinfeld, and I rewatched the last few episodes of Cheers because I don't remember how it ended.
I do. I remember that one. That was a family event.
But I can't think of it. You know, when a show comes to an end, when people know it's going to come to an end, it's how can you do it properly? If it's a loved show, I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, aren't you?
Exactly.
Absolutely. You're going to get critics no matter what. So
yeah, and you just get people complaining about it should have finished 2 seasons ago. It should have done this. It should have done that. I can, the only 2 seasons I can think of where I was probably happy about how it ended was I actually quite like the end of Sopranos, the way it finished.
I love that.
Yeah,
I think that is the benchmark for me.
And the way The Wire ended as well. Maybe it wasn't on the highest season, but they ended, it wrapped up things properly. But yeah, with sitcoms, I can't think. The Office, the UK version of The Office ended in a nice, satisfying way after, like I say, 2 seasons and a couple of specials. I'm trying to search my mind now. But I guess when the TV shows are dragged on a bit, Ab Fab and Only Fools and Horses.
Bringing it back to
maybe a little even more.
The Cosby Show.
Sure.
What out of the whole season, the whole series, can you pinpoint in terms of writing what is your top moment / joke?
I think the most rewatched episodes in our family would be the ones where Cliff's parents had their anniversaries, and there was a different song each year. It was just always a joy to do that. I think those would be the highlight shows of each kind of season that we did.
Cliff's parents are so warm, like everyone's already warm, and then when they come into it, they bring a real warmth to those characters and to the rest of it. It lifts it whenever they're on it, I feel.
2 things I love a lot also, just the intro sequences when they're dancing in the different ways and the music they have.
Yeah.
It was different each season, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's different each season, and I just absolutely used to love that. So that's one thing I'd take away as well. And also when the other characters came in, like Sandra's husband, Elvin, like when Elvin first comes into it, those characters that slot in really well. Some didn't work as well, but I think, Elvin was a good character to bring in when he adds another dimension to the show as well.
And even when they brought Raven in, it could have felt like, we're just trying to bring Rudy back, and it worked. I think when they made the right decision, it really did work. And so often in sitcoms, it can feel a little bit, you're forcing that one.
Almost bringing it full circle. You mentioned about there being different tracks and dancing for each season. That's something that The Wire does, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I could talk a bit about The Wire if you want. I know a bit about that show.
The thing is that we got quite dark on the whole Bill Cosby thing, I think.
Yeah.
The idea of the Cosby children growing up in Baltimore is quite a dark idea. Maybe one for fan.
Quite sad.
It's like a fan fiction, on the corners.
Okay, so where can people find you and listen to you talking about The Wire and other things?
So The Wire, we have a show with David Corkery, also one of the co-hosts of the Cinemile, and where we talk about each episode of The Wire, episode by episode. It's called The Wire Stripped. Type that into Google and we'll come up. We've just finished season 1. As this goes out, start recording season 2 to come out later in the year. It's the best we can say at the moment.
You've had some fantastic guests on there.
Yeah, it's been outstanding having a lot of really noticeable people in the cast and crew, really important people. Wendell Pierce, who played Bunk, Lance Reddick, who played Daniels, Frankie Faison, who's Burrell, but also had key people at key scenes. So in a recent episode, we had Trey Chaney, who played Poot, talking about that episode. I'm not going to break it. I'm not going to spoil it for people who haven't watched it. So it's been really amazing to get that. And also people who were in Baltimore at the time going through that shit, they just reached out to us and said, hey, I love your show. We want to talk about it. And I was like, yeah, we'd love to hear your story. And subject matter experts like David Nutt, who was fired by the UK government for saying drugs should be better controlled. It's just gone in such a more powerful direction than we anticipated when me and Dave just thought about sitting on a park bench talking about The Wire.
It's a fantastic podcast, and we really love it. And I think we're big fans of The Wire, so we get, even if you've not watched The Wire, it will make you want to watch The Wire and then come back to the podcast and learn so much more about it. And I think that's what podcasting does excellently, and
it does.
Show in particular. And you also do the Flixwatcher, which we talked about at the top of the show. So what have you got coming up with that?
Flixwatcher, we have. Oh, there's so many. We've got like 10 episodes in the bank. I think we're going to record one on Network, which is the Sidney Lumet film, in the next couple of weeks.
Wow. I love that.
Next episode, we're recording our Love and Friendship, which is based on a Jane Austen short, I think it was, and Their Finest. We're recording that next week. I don't know what's next out, actually. We just released Mudbound, which is Oscar nominated for Mary J. Blige, Oscar nominated for the cinematography, the first female cinematographer to be nominated.
But no, and it's an amazing podcast. You've had as good guests on that one. You've had like Adam Buxton and incredible people, as well as kind of more I say grassroots, but smaller podcasts. It's a really wide range of people talking about a really wide range of films. Thank you so much for joining us, talking about the state of the sitcom, the Cosby Show.
Went a bit awry, didn't it? It wasn't much humour at some points of this discussion, but I hope that's okay.
We've covered the full spectrum of the state of the sitcom. Thank you,
cheers, guys.
And cheers.
Bye.
Bye.